Hello, I'm not going to make this one too long, but I want to treat it something of a part two to the video made on the shooting of um, Justine Damond, the Australian woman who was killed by a police officer in Minneapolis. There are a few talking points that I would like to add to this. I probably alluded to them in the last video, but I think it's worth discussing, hopefully rationally and calmly. Because the problem is, this is something that in the last video I admittedly was quite angry, and I stand by everything I said, but there are a lot of things that are being said that I think need to be challenged. There's a lot of ignorant statements going on out there that simply don't add up to the situation as it is. Now, one of them is this argument that is coming from some people that people only care now because the victim on this occasion happened to be white. That simply is not the case. And they're also pointing out double standards because the officer in this case happened to be a Somali American. Now, the argument that people only care because she's white, whatever people's personal reason for caring about this, the idea that there hasn't been attention on previous cases is just clearly a lie. It's just plain wrong. And anyone who pays any sort of attention to the news over the last 3 or 4 years will know that that is disingenuous. It simply is not true. I mean, when they say that, it's implying that all those huge protests, the countless debates, the newspaper coverage, the magazine coverage, the talk show debates, the channel news debates, um, they're acting as if all of that hasn't happened. And suddenly there's only attention because of this case. I think this case is getting attention because of the circumstances of it. The fact is, this woman had no criminal record. She was a very peaceful person by all accounts, and it was a particularly shocking case because of the circumstances of it. You can read into it whatever way you want, that it's because she was white, but that's another piece of information, disinformation, I should say. Black Lives Matter has implied that only black people are killed. This is just factually not true. I would concede that disproportionately African Americans have suffered from police shootings. I would say there is definitely something in that. But the argument that only black people have been killed is fundamentally a racist argument because it is not true. That then implies that there have been no Hispanic Americans killed and that there have been no white Americans killed. There has been a small number of Asian Americans, although that is significantly smaller, and Pacific Islanders. But whilst it is true that there is a disproportionate number of African Americans in proportion to the population killed by the police, the fact of the matter is there has also been white Americans killed. The only difference is those cases really get no attention, especially if you have a situation where it's a white officer killing a white citizen. That is not going to make news at all, unless the circumstances they really do warrant it. And it might be because in those cases, the white suspect really was an armed criminal or someone with a violent history. So why would that make news? I made the point in the previous video that the media love race controversies, and I think that is very obvious. It's not that this shouldn't be discussed, it's not that it should be spoken about, but I do believe that the media collectively play a big role in, to put it plainly, shit stirring. I also suspect the reason this particular case has got attention, and no one seems to be thinking about this, but I think it might be a factor, is the fact that this woman was Australian. So it almost amounts to an international incident. I'm not suggesting it is an international incident, but people don't seem to be taking that into account. That's why Prime Minister Turnbull weighed into it, because an Australian citizen, a citizen of his country, was killed. Um, So there's a lot of factors as to why this case is getting attention. But the argument that this is the only case that has got attention is a lot of nonsense. I mean, look at the amount of coverage and debate that went on around the Philando Castile case, around the Eric Garner case. They were equally covered, if not more so. So I just don't accept that argument. It is simply not true. And I think the people who are pushing this are are just being willfully ignorant. Either that or they are deliberately shit stirring. Um, Speaking personally, I have consistent standards. I believe in any situation where you have an unarmed person who is not posing a threat and they end up dead, that should be controversial. There should be anger. There should be inquiries. There should be questions. I saw a debate the other night on CGTN, um, which is the successor network of CCTV News, which is a Chinese network. Now, hear me out before you say, oh, it's just, it's Chinese government propaganda. I have to be honest, this was actually a pretty balanced debate. Both sides were heard. There was a guy representing the police, or at least he's a former police officer. He now runs a private security firm. There was a social activist and another person who was a social commentator. They were both black. Um, Now, the guy who came from this private contracting firm said he was independent. Well, that wasn't quite true. Nevertheless, this was a very comprehensive debate. I can't say it was entirely calm. There were a few heated moments. The social commentator, she got angry at a few points because she thought the guy was assuming her positions. And anyway, I hope that gets uploaded somewhere because I thought it was a very good debate. It was comprehensive and a lot of issues were brought up. Now, the contractor guy said it wouldn't be reasonable to expect officers to have their body cam on all the time. I'm not so sure that's true. I basically take the view if you're innocent, you've nothing to hide. There's absolutely no rationale why these officers did not have their body cam on in this particular situation because it was going to be the initial report, as I understand it from Justine Damond, was she feared that a woman was being sexually assaulted in the alleyway. Now, they should have approached that situation as a confrontation situation. I think one of the major things that comes out of this is clearly there needs to be a very, very serious review of training techniques. And I made this point before. I understand that officers face often very challenging, dangerous situations. They're arguably underpaid and they work in very stressful conditions. But when someone signs up to supposedly protect and defend the public, they're assuming a position of power, relative power, and responsibility. Now, with that comes, in my opinion, there should be a level-headed thinking. If you're going to have officers who shoot every time they're scared, that is a very dangerous situation. They are in a dangerous job and they do face real threats, but they have to have the strength of character to have some degree of self-control. If you have officers shooting every time they feel threatened, well, what's that going to lead to? Every time a car backfires, are they going to shoot? It's a very dangerous situation. Um, I also think that there needs to be serious questions about the double standards. Why it is that officers are immediately put on desk duty. Now, I'm not suggesting this officer is an evil man who went out to kill someone. I'm not suggesting that, and I don't think that's what happened. But I do think he shot first and thought about it later. And the fact of the matter is, an innocent person is dead, and he has to face the consequences for that. Um, It's not good enough that he's just put on desk duty. There has to be a perception that there is some consistency. Because you can make exactly the same argument that a homeowner shoots someone, and there's been huge debates over that. Let's say, for the sake of argument, though, that a homeowner shoots someone because they're scared, because they hear a noise, now they would immediately be arrested. But if a police officer does it under the same circumstances, i.e., because he is scared, he's put on desk duty. There shouldn't be double standards. And that is why this leads to a situation where people think it is essentially a police state. But so long as the racial dynamic keeps coming into it, I think it is very important that the facts are laid out. So this is why I don't have much respect for the likes of Black Lives Matter, because they're not talking about facts. They are stirring up an already very tense situation. And as far as I'm concerned, they've done nothing to build bridges. I'm not saying they shouldn't be angry. I'm not saying there aren't legitimate questions about the disproportionate number of black people being killed. But when Black Lives Matter say it's only black people being killed, they are lying. And they need to be challenged on that because that only leads to further anger, mistrust of the police, mistrust of white people. So I think everyone who is in a position of any authority, and that includes social activists, have to be very responsible for what they say and do. Let me know your thoughts, and thanks for watching.